Welcome to my speedrun from 100k to 10 million coins where I'm only allowed to flip. The main reason I wanted to do this is to prove that you do not need a lot of money to start flipping. As you can see, we started off with NPC flips. We made about 39k and it took 2 minutes. First, I want to quickly go over the rules. Number 1, time starts when you are in Skyblock. Number 2, no cookie buff. Cookie buff is 3 million coins, that's more than 100k. Number 3, you can't just place orders and log off, it has to be within reason. And number 4, the time ends when you have 10 million coins in the purse. Okay, go. I then decided to flip enchanted clay. Basically, you can insta-buy enchanted clay and sell to the NPC for profit. What they won't tell you is this is actually in fact terrible and not at all worth doing. I ended up making somewhere around like 5,000 coins. Not good. While you watch me waste a bunch of time, let's go over why I'm actually doing this challenge. I get asked a lot how to make money with nothing to begin with, and the truth is you don't need to have a lot to start flipping, and this video is proof of that. I then started to branch out and look for some flips. The first one that looked alright was red gifts. It was about 42k per one and you made 8k per flip. I ended up doing this for literally ages, and I honestly have no idea how much I made from it all. All I know is that it was a lot. My method for this item, and let's face it, the entire Bazaar, was to make sure that I was the top order for as long as possible. And the way that I did that is undercut everyone. MVP of this video is Bazaar Notifier, letting me know when any cretins undercut me. There are a lot of times like this where I sat and waited for flips to buy or sell, and in these times I could have logged off and saved time, but it felt like it would go against the spirit of the challenge since I didn't actually need to log off. So what I ended up doing in these times was actually insta-buying clay again and selling it, because I figured it was better than sitting around and doing absolutely nothing. The red gifts were doing pretty well, as I would often have 3 or 4 buying and selling at one time, and each of them making around 8k. This was really starting to add up. But I couldn't find anything else at that time. I was desperate to diversify with new items because it meant instead of waiting for people to insta-sell or buy one item, I could do that with a range of items and make more money. And of course, you already know, I continued to insta-buy clay. In hindsight, I probably should have just kept looking for an item because eventually, as you'll find out, I end up finding an item that makes me so much money. But before that, with this collection, I have hit my first milestone of 250k in 23.5 minutes. Honestly, not sure if that's good. I guess technically I've more than doubled my money, so cool. There is a long way to go though. And after a few more red present flips, I had finally found it. I had found an item, and that item was the Necromancer brooch. Honestly, at this point, I thought for sure this item was too good to be true. There's about a 50k margin on an item that only cost 25,000 coins. And in exactly 1 minute and 23 seconds, I had bought my first one. Now, as long as this sold, I was going to be making a lot of money. Another 8 seconds pass, and the item sells, profiting me 70,000 coins in under 2 minutes. And the profits started to skyrocket. This is the break that I had been looking for. All I was doing at this point was just buying and selling red presents and Necromancer brooches, and I was making a lot of money. And there we go, 500k achieved. It took me 23.5 minutes to get to 250k, and to get the next 250k took me just over 7 minutes. But things did not stop there. We went straight back to the Necromancer brooches and the red presents, and a few more enchanted clay for absolutely no reason at all. Now that I had passed the 500k point, I started to look for some more expensive items. The first one that looked good was a giant's tooth. Each one was 250k and sold for 400k. So if you see any buy, just know that I've made 150k profit, which is huge at this point. What you should expect when you're flipping is that the more money that you have, the more expensive items you can buy, and the more expensive items you can buy typically comes with a larger margin. So from this point forward, along with my normal flips, I was also trying to have one order of giant's teeth in at all times. We were really making progress. The flips that I had managed to find were doing us really well. And to add to that, it didn't take too long and we had bought and sold our first giant's tooth, profiting us 150k. Things continued like this for a little while with not much changing. I did try a few other items that I ended up not working for me, but I'm not going to mention those. Fast forward a little bit, I wanted to share a sequence that was really insane. I buy and sell 6 Necromancer brooches and 2 giant's teeth. Tooths? I don't know, but it made me 720k in less than 3 minutes. I had 1.6 mil cash, and at this point I decided I wanted to go to the auction house. I missed a few flips, including an aspect of the dragon. Quick side note, what has happened to the price of an aspect of the dragon? 1.3 mil is absurd. I never thought I would see the day that a flower of truth was cheaper than an aspect of the dragon. Anyway, I didn't have enough money for the items I really wanted, so back to the bazaar for me. I then continued on the exact same way that I had been going for the last little while, and the reason for that is because it was working. And when you're flipping, if you find a few flips that work for you, you would be very silly to try to change that. So I just continued on like this, but for the sake of content, I tried a few other things, such as the fur balls that you're seeing here. I bought those for 200k and I was going to be able to sell them for 300k, but as you'll find out, it didn't quite work out for me, as I basically just ran out of patience and sold them instantly. So, but in this period, the item that was making me the most money was these giant's teeth. Every one that I bought was just such a massive injection of money into the account, which was helping with the progression of this challenge quite a bit. Although the Necromancer brooch was just a really nice source of consistent money as well, so it's hard to know which one was actually better. I then decided to buy some swarm books, because from the looks they were like 200k profit each, so I placed an order for 2 of them. And I wanted to show this here actually. Here you're watching me collect 2 Necromancer brooches and listing them back up again, and if you have a look, they're actually 250k profit basically for that. So I think that it's pretty much decided that Necromancer brooches did do better for me overall. I then decided that I would go back to the auction house, but as it were, I didn't have enough money again for the same item that I wanted, which was ancient crimson armor, and it was the last thing searched, and this is the biggest shame of all. This item here, this ancient crimson chestplate, was 2 million coins, and I could have sold it for 2.7 had I had that money, which I did not have. I then missed another aspect of the dragons, which I wasn't too upset about because it was only like 200k profit, but still, seriously. So like a good boy, I went back to the bazaar where I belong. After a few more flips and the fact that I actually forgot that I had 2 orders of Swarm 1 books and not 1, I cancelled that order, and in 1 hour and 17 minutes, I had finally reached 2.5 mil. I actually had a bit more than 2.5 mil, but that's all I had in my purse, so that's all that I was counting. Enjoy the short clip bash of every flip that I got in the next few minutes. And finally, I went back to the auction house and looked at ancient crimson armor, and to my absolute surprise, like 20 minutes later, that same item was still there and still available for me to buy. So I picked it up, did a few more flips, and I called it a day. The reason that I called it a day was basically because most of my money was tied up in the ancient crimson chestplate, so there was not much more for me to do. When we left off, we had a bunch of orders in the bazaar. We sold our Swarm 1 book and our Necromancer brooch, making us around 270k. We were also able to buy a book of stats and a giant's tooth, which, as long as they sell, will end up making us like 400 to 500k profit. In the last part, we left an order in for an ancient crimson chestplate. We bought it for 2 mil and we had it listed for 2.65 mil, profiting us 650k. But unfortunately, that item did not sell. So I listed that back up again in hopes that it would sell. Now, at this point, I tried to have a look at some of the other items that I was flipping, and while they were still quite good, the aftermath of me logging off for an entire day was that the margins on a lot of these items had closed quite a bit. This meant that I needed to look for some other items, as well as continuing to obviously do the items that were working quite well. But because I had quite a bit of money, I didn't foresee this being that much of an issue. After placing the orders I wanted to place, I had only 39k left. So I wasted a bit of time looking for items I couldn't even afford, then decided I may as well go do my daily NPC flips. I want to take this time to clear up a few things from the first part. The time I get is pretty good, but it can absolutely be beaten. I know for a fact that even I could beat it. The reason for that is that there are fantastic methods like taking advantage of events or some crafts, even some that have been mentioned in the comments of the last video, like gems and enchanted books that are extremely fast. The reason I didn't do that is because I want this speed run to be repeatable for anyone at any time. And if I use a specific item and that item is not flippable at that time, it's useless to new players. That is why I only use easy to replicate methods. So all you need to do is find an item that has a good margin and high volume of insta buy and sells, and you are good to go. It actually was a real shame because Necromancer broaches and Giant's Tooth's margin had really collapsed in the time that I had off. It was basically not worth me hopping off. I would have made a lot more money in a shorter period of time had I just stayed on for an unfathomable amount of time and sank a little bit more sweat into my chair, but nonetheless, I decided I would continue to place some orders for these items, and it's not like they weren't working. They were doing quite well for me, but it was just a lot less than it was before. And then it was at this point. This is the point where I saw a brand new item, the Dragon Horn. This item was 850k and had about a 350,000 coin margin when I first saw it, which was just absolutely insane. What I didn't know is exactly how insane it was going to end up being for me, as you will see towards the end of the video. And amazingly, in literally 11 minutes, the Necromancer chestplate sells. To put that in perspective, I had that listed for at least 6 hours last time and it didn't sell in the entire 6-hour period. Which is actually extremely handy because I have 4 million coins now in my purse that I can look for more flips with. Which of course included another Dragon Horn. Quick side note, have you ever seen anybody with this many Necromancer broaches? Because I seriously have not. At this point, I found another flip. Wither Blood was about 310k profit per one with an initial investment of 2.1 million coins. All my main flips were still going great. I was making insane profit, but at this point I had an issue, and that was because of all of the many orders that I had, it was getting hard to make sure I was undercutting all of the cretins. So I cancelled a bunch of the orders, especially ones that were not doing super well or that hadn't filled at all for a long period of time, and left in just a select few orders that were historically making me quite a lot of money, like Necromancer's Brooch and Giant's Tooth, or that had huge potential like the Wither Blood and Dragon's Horns. I was looking at the auction house as well quite a bit, but I'd ultimately decided against it mainly because I wasn't certain that if I did buy anything it would be able to sell in the appropriate amount of time. And really, I just thought I could do a lot more actively looking at the bazaar with the money rather than buying something on the auction house. And finally, even though it kind of seemed like it may not happen, one of the Dragon's Horns finally bought. Unfortunately, the sell price of this item had been absolutely decimated, but even still I was looking to make about 200,000 coins per one. But it didn't stop there. It was like the floodgates had been opened. The next one came within 5 minutes, and literally moments later the first one had sold. And it was with that sale that I actually hit the 5 million coin mark, the halfway point, in just under 2 hours. But now I had 5 million coins and I went on a spending spree. I put an order in for 4 more Dragon Horns, and while I was putting in orders for other things and changing around some other orders, including another 8 Necromancer's broaches, one of them I had already bought, so I listed that expecting another 200,000 coins profit. I was changing some more orders around and it has literally been another 37 seconds, and 2 more had bought. It was slightly worrying though because they were selling a lot slower than they were buying, but as long as they did end up selling, everything was going to be okay, although my hope was really that they started to sell quickly. It was at this point that everything seemed to die down quite a bit. I was basically at the point where I would buy a bunch of different items and I would just not be able to sell them at all. So I ended up basically stockpiling a bunch of different items. It didn't take all that long until I was completely out of money and just left with items that absolutely would not sell. I also want to remind you of exactly how I actually flip in the bazaar, and that is literally to undercut everybody. Here is a short montage of me literally just dropping the price as soon as I see anybody outdating any of my items. I basically make it so that if I'm flipping, you may as well not be, because I will be the only one buying or selling anything today. Thank you. At my peak, I believe I had something like 7 Dragon Horns. It was just insane, honestly. And with each Dragon Horn being worth like over 1 million coins, the challenge seemed to be like virtually over, but the only problem is that I could not get them to sell. I know when it's sped up and chopped up the way that it is, it doesn't look like it took a long time, but in between each sale was sometimes like 15 to 20 minutes. Honestly, at this stage, I probably should have just logged off because it was literally just, there were points where I was just staring at the chat box, waiting for anybody to outdate me so that I could take back my spot as rightful ruler of the item. Oh, and hey, you remember how I mentioned Witherblood before? I actually placed an order for a few of those. And with that, I did my most controversial thing in this whole challenge yet. I logged off with an order of 2 Witherblood buying, 10 Necromancer's broaches, as well as I was selling 4 Dragon's Horns and some other items. And the next day, I got back on with plans of finishing the challenge. I'm hoping that this really demonstrates the power of leaving offers in. That is right, literally everything bought and sold except for 1 Witherblood. And not only that, the price of Witherblood went up by like 300,000 coins. In the way of taking inventory, I had 6.79 million coins in the purse, a Witherblood worth 2.7 million coins, and 10 Necromancer's broaches, which, if they all sold, was worth about 900,000 coins. In other words, the challenge was pretty much complete, except I had to sell the items. And because I didn't want to be cancelled for controversy, I decided that I would sit on and wait until they sold. We're currently at 2 hours 38 as of everything being listed. I literally had to leave this in because I thought it was pretty funny, but you've just seen me literally spend like a long period of time just reordering a booster cookie like over and over and over again, until finally I get one and list it up, and with taxes I'm going to make 12,000 coins from it. So I get outdated on the Witherblood, I relist it, and it sells instantly, and with that the challenge is over. Thank you so much for watching.